And we are live. So, hey, what's up, New Zealand and the world? Lucas Lawman's here, Kiwi Voice. So, you know that because you're on the page. We have got Zeth from Camp Sour sitting with us to let us know what's going on up at the refinery and what Camp Sour is doing to bring awareness to it. So, thanks for taking the time to hang out with us, Zeth. Really appreciate it.
Cool, man. No, thank you. I appreciate you having me on here, and it's sort of good to have another platform to sort of let everyone know what's going on with the refinery.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's exactly what we're all about. We're doing our best to be a free speech platform or a voice for the people as much as we can, as well as providing our own opinion, which you can't avoid as well, of course. So we'll give it another sort of 10 or 15 seconds, see if any more peeps will get on. But as per usual with Kiwi Voice, this will permanently stay up on the page. And our videos, Zeth, are usually quite a slow burner. So we get initial small reaction, but then they grow considerably over time in terms of views and reactions. We seem to be a bit more of a destination page as opposed to a feed page, if you get my drift.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's good.
Awesome. All right, we've got just over a dozen people on, so let's get into it. So the floor is yours, my man. Tell us all about Camp Sour, how they came to be and why they exist. Go for your life.
Yeah, man. Well, all the members of Camp Sour originally came together in Wellington, and we went down there to, be a part of the protest down there, and that's hence the name camp, because we camped down there together.
Yep.
And we have had other camps as well. We've got together and sort of discussed the refinery initially and decided to sort of do something about it. So what we've done is we focus first and foremost on getting information out into the general public, because we felt that there's a bit of lack of information out there and people don't really understand. And when you've got a pretty biased search engine like Google, it's pretty hard to get accurate information,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as far as the public goes, most of what they know is that the shareholders decided to close the refinery because it wasn't profitable anymore, and it's apparently more profitable to import pre-refined fuels now. There's obviously some lies entailed in that, and we were fortunate enough to be a part of a meeting at Forum North in Whangarei and listen to some of the people in the industry, in the refinery industry. One of them was Aaron Holroyd. He's been a refinery operator for 35 years, and he's also a delegate for the union as well. And okay. He had a lot to say. We also heard from Edward Miller. He's from the union as well. He's their analyst and also a delegate as well. And he played a big part in writing letters to all the ministers, associated ministers, Labour ministers, and Green ministers, etc. And yep. we also heard from the Secretary of the Maritime Union, which is Craig Harrison, and he's a bit of a weapon with his information too, because he understands the shipping industry better than anyone else. So that's a big part of it, and it's good to really pay attention to the shipping industry right now as well. And
yes, massive, yeah.
Yeah, so Aaron had a bit to say. Was good hearing, some of the numbers he gave us. He said when it comes to refining crude, our break even here was $4 USD a barrel. So that's the cost of refining the product and turning it into fuel. So
got you. Yep.
And right now we have refining margins that are through the roof. So we're not capitalizing on those refining margins now, and so it's they basically decided to close the refinery based on a recession of refining margins in 2020 because of COVID.
Okay.
So things slowed down, with the lockdowns, and
yes,
throughput capacity was reduced in refineries here and there, and fuel prices went down. So they saw a loss in refining margins about $114 million, which sounds like a lot, but in reality, that only equated to 1 cent a litre at the pump throughout that time.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yep.
And the funny thing to take note of is that the shareholders, like BP, Mobil, Ampol, etc., they're the guys that control the refining margins at the pump. So, kind of, that's like, why didn't you just raise the price a touch? If it meant ensuring fuel security moving into the future, it just makes no sense. But because of that recession, some of the union members worked on presenting ministers with a solution, and one of those solutions was for the government to take on a fee floor and cap agreement, or take over the fee floor and cap agreement. It used to be between the refining customers and the refinery, but some countries, what they've done is the government has taken on that agreement, and basically that agreement is there. So when they have high refining margins like what we're experiencing now, they can skim money off the top, and they can use that money to put back into the refinery to prop it up during recessions of refining margins. And it sort of just, it stabilizes refining margins, and it's a blanket of protection.
Sure.
But the unfortunate thing is all those Labour ministers and Green ministers didn't want to know about it. They didn't really, they decided, one of them even, Megan Woods, she had the cheek to say they didn't want another TY point on their hands, which is, it seems a bit silly to compare aluminium.
It's not the same thing at all. Not the same thing at all.
Absolutely not, man. So, people, I keep seeing people say in public that it had nothing to do with the government. The decision had nothing to do with the government, but in fact it did, because that was put to them and they ignored it. They decided they weren't going to do that. And I've crunched some numbers, and interestingly enough, had they had taken on that agreement, they would have already put aside, at least $600 million this year, into a revenue neutral fund that was there to prop up refineries. So they decided to close the refinery based on a $114 million loss, and then they missed out on the opportunity to put away $600 million already this year and counting. And now they also want to spend about $500 million to dismantle the refining capacity and convert it to an import. So, it's like...
Yeah, so why do you think they haven't adjusted TAC, as obviously very short-sighted, short-term thinking, deciding to withdraw during the pandemic, when prices were obviously going to be down, but obviously only going to be temporarily? Things have changed. We obviously know the price of crude across the world, and as you say, the refining margins have returned. Why do you think they haven't adjusted TAC? Do you think it's in response to the government's push on these removing fossil fuel policies, or do you think it's something else?
Yeah, well, the only thing that really makes sense, once you delve into this, investigate it, but the only really thing that makes sense is that it's deliberate.
Yeah.
Because it would seem that way. You know what I mean? There was solutions there, but they ignored them. And you have to wonder why. And the thing is, now that our economy's in a state, we're looking at a big recession by the end of this year. And the thing is, the dollar is backed by oil, right? It's a petrodollar. So,
yes.
What do they need oil if the dollar's going down? And it sounds like they already have a new system of digital currency moving forward into the future. So maybe that plays a part in it. Something to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely all of that in the bigger picture, and if we got into the whole globalization side of things, this conversation will go on for hours. You seem pretty sort of aware of the different factors that are at play here, 100%, Zeth. So I appreciate that. So what is Camp Sour doing in response? Because I understand there's some organised peaceful protest action. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so first and foremost, we are running an information campaign, because when we first went up to the refinery and stood alongside some of the protesters up there, it became apparent to me that some of them didn't fully understand why they were there. You know what I mean? And a lot of people didn't understand the information behind this. So I thought, to create a movement, you kind of need that foundation of information. So we sort of stepped back, and we've just been sort of putting the information out there on social media. So we're running a Facebook page where we're keeping pretty well up to date with what's going on, not just in New Zealand, but around the world as well. Because it's not just New Zealand. There's countries all over the world that have reduced throughput and ultimately shut refineries, and they're also feeling they're feeling the blowback from those decisions as well. the east coast of America started running out of fuel yesterday. There were hundreds of trucks parked up waiting for fuel. So, so we're keeping an eye on what's going on around the world too. So we have a pretty good idea of what we can expect here. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's going to be that's going to be more important as time goes on. Obviously, as the refinery goes through its process to shut if it continues to do so. We're going to be more reliant on what's going on overseas and being able to get stuff in here. So, if you can, Zeth, perhaps elaborate a bit for our viewers. Why is it so important to people like yourself, Camp Sour, and others to have this refinery stay open if at all possible? Why is that so key?
Well, because there's a lot going on around the world right now, and one of them is the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And one of the things that happened following that was all the Western countries quickly jumped on board with each other and pushed a lot of sanctions against Russia, like straight off the bat, instantly. And the thing you have to be careful of is, one of Russia's biggest allies is China. And China's biggest, some of China's biggest trading partners is Singapore and Korea, and that's who we're getting our fuel off. So it kind of seems it's definitely risky in that aspect, but not only that, but the shipping industry never fully recovered from COVID. It's been under stress, and after talking to the Secretary of the Maritime Union, he mentioned that the shipping industry is not doing well at the moment. And the other thing as well is New Zealand is at the bottom of the shipping routes, so we're literally the last country in line to receive fuel.
Right.
So it's extremely risky. I think if we knew how low we were dipping on our reserves already, I think everyone would be a little bit worried. There's literally no margin for error now.
Yeah, understand. And you put that really clearly. You've linked that all together really clearly for us. So I do appreciate that. Very much that the shipping has got worse. Continued COVID restrictions, and when I say COVID restrictions, what I mean by that is people needing to isolate or stay away. And obviously societally around the world, the fear that's been driven into everybody, and who will more likely stay away, even if it isn't. All of that stuff, the staff shortages, the continued push in that direction, as well as a number of other factors, has continued to impact shipping. And to understand what you've explained to us there in terms of the route and where we're getting that oil from, that's really, really good to know. Really interesting stuff. Now, in terms of what the refinery would do, should we be able to push back on this? So as things get worse, for example, let's throw out a scenario out there. World War III, it gets ever closer. Things really kick off. Shipping becomes even worse. Obviously, the world is in chaos. Ideally, where we'd want to be is have crude stacked up at Marsden in a significant way to be able to put us through that period. Is that the best description?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have our own Taranaki crude fields, where we produce, I can't remember how many barrels, but a lot of barrels of sweet crude, which is it's a light crude. So we've been importing heavy crude from the Middle East, and our refinery is set up primarily to refine heavy crude, but they can also refine light crude, and they kind of just need to mix the crude with a bit of heavy crude to be able to refine it. That's my understanding of it. I'm not a refining expert, but that's
for sure.
Yeah. And people, hearing Miller from the union talk, he said, it's pretty inconceivable to think that we wouldn't be able to get our hands on any heavy crude to be able to refine our own light crude, and that is more than enough to keep essential services afloat. If everything around the world crumbles, and the rest of the countries can't, at least we'd be okay down here if we still had our refinery.
Yes.
And apparently there are more heavy crude reserves being discovered in New Zealand, and they're sending samples away to be tested right now. So it just means we could have had we could have been completely self-dependent in that aspect, and we wouldn't have to worry about emergencies and fuel shortages that are heavily dependent on getting product from overseas.
Yeah, for sure. So you think the government's policy of banning all offshore oil and gas exploration is definitely another factor in this whole situation?
Yeah, yeah, possibly,
Yep.
possibly. I
Yep.
mean, they're making a big push to get away from fossil fuel, obviously.
Yes. Yep.
You know, there's a bunch of EPA laws in America right now where they're actually the EPA is auditing a lot of mechanics that are working on, you know, emissions vehicles, and some of them are even being fined for selling aftermarket parts for emissions vehicles. And
Right.
you know, some of them have been slapped with 16, and it's only just some people they seem to be picking on right now, but it's
Yeah.
something that's
Yeah.
going to work. It's something that's going to be large scale, and it's also going to be a problem here in New Zealand too, where mechanics like myself, I'm a mechanic and I'm sort of involved in the motorsport industry as well. But there will come a point where the EPA will audit us
Yeah.
and, you know, try and tell us, hey, you're not allowed to work on emissions vehicles anymore because they're
Right.
trying to move
Right.
away from fossil fuel vehicles. And
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you do, if if they, you know, like one guy I followed in America, he was selling aftermarket ECUs, which is a control unit for the engine, and because they're for emissions vehicles, he got a $16,000 fine. And if he couldn't pay that $16,000 fine within a month, then it would turn into a $180,000 fine.
Oh, for goodness sake. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another thing to worry about. They're pushing pretty hard on getting rid of emissions vehicles altogether. But the thing is we aren't ready to make that transition yet. The money hasn't been invested in the associated infrastructures to make that
Yes. Not
transition.
that quick anyway. At all. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Everything in New Zealand, all our food supply chains and you know, heavy industries are all heavily dependent on diesel fuel.
Yeah.
So, you know, without that, we'll never dream of making the transition towards renewable fuels.
Exactly, and there's also the thing that I've noticed in news more recently is around the agricultural sector and
Yeah,
how the diesel prices are. You know, you look at a field and they need to fill up a massive combine harvester to sort that, and it costs so many X thousand, and those costs doubling, tripling, obviously, along with everything else. So I think the gap between diesel and normal unleaded petrol is shrunk significantly.
yeah,
So, so yeah, it's interesting times, and it is a real concern. So it's good that we've got people such as yourselves out there trying to bring this awareness. So what are you hearing out and about? You know, in response to some of the you know, the information you're trying to get out there, and talking to people on the street. Is there firstly, let's take that back a step. Up at Marsden, is there a permanent sort of protest in place, or what's going up there?
I'm not sure. There was a large number of people up there in the beginning, but
Yeah.
from what I understand, it's sort of there's not as many people up there
Okay.
for whatever reason. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Time's going on, and there's various reasons that come into that. So that's okay. All right, and now let us. Before I was going to sort of head towards a close off and get you to push Camp Sarah and where we get information from you guys. But have you got anything else you wanted to go into there, Zeth, before we do that?
No, one thing I will say though is like it's not just fuel. You know, the refinery
Yes.
doesn't just produce fuel. There's lots of other things that also contributes in medicines, fertilizers, CO2, and like lots of factories operate on CO2. We've heard from people in different industries that have said, oh, our production costs have gone through the roof because of the little ripple effects from the closure of the refinery. It's not just fuel. So we're going to
Yeah.
see all sorts of impacts from this.
Yeah,
Um,
it goes into a million different areas. You're exactly right. You know, it's obviously not just petrol in your car. That's one small part. So yeah, it is. It's an interesting, like I say, an interesting situation. What I'd like to do is I would like to absolutely keep you guys on the books. Let's get a regular update. Would probably ideal. I have been struggling to get regular information from what's happening up that way.
yeah.
So it'd be really cool to stay in touch with you guys and and do this again. Tell the people out there where do they go and find information about Camp Sour and what you're doing.
Well, I mean, you can check the Facebook page out. That's probably the most up to date platform that we have at the moment is Facebook. And
Yep.
we're also, while I'm on air with you, I'll mention that there is a national stand up to fuel prices happening on the 3rd and 4th of July.
Okay.
And it'd be good to see people get out there and sort of join in and have their voices heard. You know, let our government know we're not happy with that decision, and let the oil cartels know we're not happy about that decision as well.
Yeah.
You know, I think there might be some small convoys heading towards. There's going to be a park up in Westgate where people sort of get together, especially the car clubs and things like that. We're going to get together and just talk about things. We'll be down there handing out information. So if you want to come see us, and we're handing out flyers that have got a few QR links there to a lot of information that I think is beneficial in learning about this sort of thing. So awesome. there's that, and there's the Facebook page. So definitely check out the Facebook page and follow it if you can or like it.
Yep. Awesome. What we'll do then is we'll chuck a link for the Facebook page in the description of this live a few minutes after we've finished. Now, the action you were talking about coming up on the 3rd or 4th of July, I think that was potentially one of the posters that your colleague sent or your friend sent through to us initially. That would be right. I'll double check the dates on that, but I'll post that as a separate post, just so people have got the whole gist of that. And let's keep in touch.
Thanks, man. I appreciate everything with the help and giving us a good non-biased platform to get our voices out there. Really appreciate it.
That's all good. That's what we're trying to do. So I'm glad I'm getting that feedback back from you. That's awesome. So we'll stay in touch. And thanks everyone. Stay safe, stay free, and we'll get all that other info up there. Cheers, team.